There is a sentence that practically every sim racer has heard at some point. It's just a game. And technically, yeah, it is. There's a computer involved, there's a screen, nobody is physically traveling at 180 miles an hour, and if you put the car into a concrete wall, the worst thing that usually happens is that you get pissed off and hit the escape key. But then things start getting a little weird, because people spend thousands of hours learning how to drive these cars. They study telemetry, they adjust tire pressures, they practice braking points, they spend thousands of dollars building cockpits in their bedrooms. They race in organized championships, they have stewards, qualifying, pit strategies, spotters, even teams. Endurance races lasting 6, 12, even 24 hours. And sometimes the people sitting in those virtual cars are the same people who climb into real ones on Sunday. So, at what point does a racing game stop being just a racing game? What exactly makes it a simulator? And how did we get from plastic steering wheels attached to computer desks to this? Let's start with the obvious problem. Nobody can completely agree on what sim racing actually is. Ask 10 racing fans where the line is between a racing game and a racing simulator, and congratulations, you started an argument. But the basic idea is simple. Racing simulator is trying to reproduce driving. Not the appearance of driving, the behavior of it. When you brake, weight moves towards the front of the car. When you accelerate, it moves backwards. When you enter a corner too quickly, the tires only have so much grip available. Use too much of it braking, steering, or accelerating, and eventually something has to give. Car understeers, it oversteers. Tires lock, the rear steps out, the suspension loads, aerodynamics change, and suddenly you're facing the wrong direction wondering why everybody else seems so much faster than you. That's the fundamental idea behind simulation. You give the computer a set of rules describing how a car should behave, and you let the player interact with those rules. The closer those rules approximate the real world, the more convincing the simulation becomes. But that's where things get complicated, because no home racing simulator can perfectly reproduce reality. You're sitting in a room, you're not experiencing the sustained G-forces of braking into a corner. You're not feeling the temperature inside the cockpit. You're not worried about breaking your legs. And unless your simulator has become considerably more elaborate than most people, your bedroom probably doesn't smell like hot fuel and brakes. So sim racing has never been about perfectly recreating reality. It's about deciding which parts of reality matter most and reproducing enough of them that the skills begin to feel real. Braking consistently, car control, racecraft, track knowledge, finding the limit, and then spending 3 hours discovering that the limit was apparently 2/10 further away than you thought. Sim racing is the pursuit of a very strange goal. Making something fake behave convincingly enough that we start treating it as real. And this brings us to one of sim racing's favorite ways of wasting an afternoon: the realism argument. Arcade, simcade, and simulation. You've probably heard these terms before. At one end, you have arcade racing. These games generally care more about the spectacle, speed, and accessibility than recreating every mechanical detail of a real car. You can throw a car sideways at ridiculous speeds, bounce off another car, hit the nitrous, occasionally launch a Lamborghini off something that a Lamborghini should absolutely never be launched from. And that's fine. Arcade racing isn't simulation failing, it's doing something completely different. Then somewhere in the middle is the word that has probably caused more internet arguments than it deserves: simcade. Games that borrow heavily from realistic driving but simplify things. The cars behave recognizably like cars. Braking matters, tires matter, setups may matter, racecraft matters, but the experience is designed to remain approachable. Then you reach what people generally call the hardcore simulators. The games where the question isn't necessarily, is this fun? It's, is this behavior accurate? And that's an important distinction, because simulation can sometimes be inconvenient. It can be frustrating. Learning to drive a race car quickly is difficult. And if the simulation is doing its job, learning the virtual version should probably be difficult too. But there's a problem with putting everything into neat little scales. Different simulators are good at different things. One might have excellent tire behavior but simplify damage. Another may reproduce an individual racing series with incredible detail but simulate fewer types of cars. One might have fantastic force feedback and another might excel at weather. And one may be loved because of its competitive system, rather than everybody agrees its physics are the best. And there's no governing body standing around with a clipboard deciding whether your racing game has earned its simulator license. Boundaries are fuzzy. And frankly, that's probably a good thing, because throughout the history of sim racing, the games sitting somewhere between accessibility and obsession have introduced millions of people to the hobby. You don't usually begin sim racing by purchasing a massive aluminum cockpit and calculating optimal tire pressures. Usually, you play a game, then you buy the wheel, and then you go broke. Of course, software is only half the story, because sim racers, apparently unsatisfied with merely purchasing video games, decided they need to begin constructing race cars inside their houses. At the simplest level, you've got a controller. And despite what certain people on internet forums may tell you, yes, you can be extremely fast with one. But the steering stick on a controller moves maybe a few centimeters. A real steering wheel can rotate hundreds of degrees. So for a lot of people, the first major step into sim racing is the wheel, usually clamped to a desk, that was never designed to experience that amount of violence. Then come pedals, a stand, a seat. People discover load cell brakes, direct drive, then triple monitors, even VR. Shifters, handbrakes, button boxes, haptic feedback, motion platforms, and wind simulation. And eventually, the same person who once said, "Why would anybody spend that much money on a fake car?" is explaining to their family why the giant aluminum structure in their spare bedroom was actually a very reasonable purchase. But all this hardware exists for a reason: input and feedback. More powerful steering system isn't automatically more realistic just because it can rip your arms off. What matters is detail. Can you feel the tires beginning to scrub as the steering unloads and the front loses grip? Can you feel a curb? Can you consistently apply the same amount of brake pressure? Better hardware gives the driver more information and more precise control, and that changes the relationship between player and simulator. You stop pressing buttons to tell the game what you want the car to do, you start physically operating it. Your feet brake, your hands steer, and you heel and toe. You shift and you correct. You're still sitting in your bedroom, but your body is beginning to participate in the illusion. And that physical connection would become enormously important as sim racing grew, because once people could drive convincingly, the next obvious question was, who's fastest? For a long time, sim racing and real motorsport existed mostly beside each other. One happened on computers, the other happened at racetracks. But eventually the boundaries started getting blurry. Real drivers began using increasingly sophisticated simulators, and sim racers began getting opportunities in real cars. Motorsport organizations began operating official virtual championships, and engineers could use these simulations as drivers could learn circuits. Teams could experiment with ideas, and professional racing drivers could compete against people whose entire racing careers existed inside computers. This creates an interesting problem, because a simulator clearly cannot reproduce everything. A sim racer isn't experiencing the physical punishment of a race car. There's no G-force or genuine danger, no financial consequences when you destroy the car. You can reset and you can restart. You can practice the same corner hundreds of times. Real motorsport doesn't give you unlimited lives. But driving skill doesn't suddenly become imaginary because the car is. Track knowledge is still track knowledge. Racecraft is still racecraft. Understanding how to position a car beside another competitor still matters. Consistency still matters. And perhaps most importantly, practice matters. Sim racing dramatically lowers one of motorsport's biggest barriers: cost. Real racing is brutally expensive. Even relatively accessible forms of motorsport require a vehicle, maintenance, tires, fuel, entry fees, transportation, safety equipment, and somewhere to actually race. If simulator isn't free, then some rigs become hilariously expensive. But compared to operating a real racing program, it's another universe. A teenager in a bedroom can race at circuits on the other side of the planet. They can drive prototypes, GT cars, rally cars, Formula One, historics, cars they may never see in person. And they can do it again tomorrow. That's powerful. Because for most of history, motorsport talent couldn't matter unless somebody could afford to put that talent in a car. Simulation doesn't completely solve that problem, but it changes it. So we arrive at the main argument. Is sim racing actually motorsport? There's a good reason to say no. Physical stakes are completely different. A simulator cannot truly reproduce fear. It cannot reproduce the heat and violence of a racing car. It doesn't punish your neck under braking, and when two drivers crash at 150 miles an hour, nobody needs an ambulance, or worse. Those differences matter. Pretending they don't would be ridiculous. But there's another side to it. Motorsport is also competition. It's racing another person, managing pressure, understanding a car, controlling it at its limit, executing the same movement correctly over and over again while somebody else is trying to do it slightly better than you. And sim racing contains an enormous amount of that. Maybe the mistake is thinking that one needs to replace the other. It doesn't. Nobody needs to claim that winning an online race is identical to winning at Le Mans, and it obviously isn't. But somebody can also spend months preparing for a virtual championship, race against exceptionally skilled drivers, make one mistake, and lose everything. The cars may be simulated, but the competition isn't. That distinction is important, because it explains how sim racing survived for decades. The graphics eventually became outdated and the computers became obsolete. Hardware gets replaced. The competition does not expire. Do people have cars, even fake ones? Eventually they're gonna race them. Today, sim racing exists somewhere between video games, engineering, esports, and motorsport. You can race casually with a controller, or you can spend years competing at the highest level. You can build a simulator in your bedroom that costs more than an actual used car. You can drive alone, join a league, or race endurance events. You can rally through forests or run oval championships, even drive cars that disappeared decades before you were born. And all of this came from years of people repeatedly asking one question: can we make this feel more real? With better physics, graphics, tracks, and steering wheels, better competition, every generation got a little closer. None of this happened overnight. Before direct drive wheels and laser scan tracks, before sim racing had become something professional drivers openly participated in, there were much simpler machines. Primitive graphics, early physics models, and developers trying to convince home computers to do something they were never really designed to do. To understand where sim racing is now, we need to understand where it came from. And to do that, we're going back to the beginning.